Starfield Shattered Space. It's a game that's unique almost in how it feels. There's only one other place that you can actually get the full experience of playing Starfield Shattered Space, and that's if you work a 9 to 5 job, finish all your work for 4 o'clock, and then realise that you have no work left to do, but an hour left to kill. It's that feeling of being in limbo, just watching things move around on a screen so it looks like you're doing something, whilst you're constantly looking for a way to speed time up through stimulation, because you're starting to feel yourself physically age. With lukewarm reception to Starfield at best, Bethesda really had to up their game and basically try to win people back with a whole new experience and give people a whole new impression. Well, they succeeded because my opinion of this is much lower than original base Starfield. In fact, I played a bit of base game Starfield as a palate cleanser in a desperate effort to try and just find some joy in the universe, and it is actually a little better than this. Starfield Shattered Space takes us to a lost part of space which basically houses House Va'ruun, which is Morrowind. I'm not going to beat around the bush, it's Space Morrowind. Except Morrowind is very inspired by Dune, which in a fantasy setting you can cover up quite well, but when you put it back into a space setting, it really does feel like Diet Dune. After investigating a space station full of ghosts, you eventually push a button and find yourself warped to a planet where you're immediately told you have to land, and then everyone starts fussing over you, and then almost immediately after that, you meet this guy who's a ghost who nobody can hear but you, who is seemingly like, in world, he's like the equivalency of one of those people descended from the Prophet Muhammad, so he's pretty important, and everybody else sees him as a ghost who can't speak, but you can actually hear him speak, so this instantly makes you special. These ghosts started appearing because this scaled citadel thing at the centre of the world, which is probably the most impressive set piece in the entire DLC, exploded, and since then the ghosts have started appearing. The explosion took about half of the city with it, and everyone's just miserable now because most of them have lost family members, property, and no one's even allowed to be sad about it because you're supposed to still venerate the god that did this to you. So, for those of you who haven't played the game, or those of you who don't remember, House Va'ruun worship the Great Serpent, a giant creature that floats through space, which is basically like Jormungandr, if I'm pronouncing that right, but in space. And because it's a giant snake floating through space, it's omnipotent and knows what everybody's thinking, feeling and doing, and thus everybody has to be as miserable as possible in order to please it. Now, unlike Elder Scrolls, this god is not established to be real. To be fair, it's not been disproven as not real, but let's face it, it's not real. And it's not like Fallout where it's kind of quaint when you find religions that are based around entities that aren't real, but you do appreciate why they are there, where the folklore came from, and the positive impact it has on people's lives. This awful religion in Shattered Skies actually has... Sorry, I called it Shattered Skies, and that's not what it's called. It's called Shattered Space, but I was thinking of that Sergei Titov game. You know, the guy who made Big Rigs, and he made that god-awful MMO called Shattered Skies that died after a year. Anyway, this particular god does not seemingly exist in its own universe. It's not like Molag Bal, for instance, from Skyrim, where his followers are awful, but they are actually worshipping a very real god, who will very really punish them if they fail. This is just a goddamn fairy tale, and it really gets irritating a few hours in when everyone's like, no, we need to make sure that no one says anything bad about this giant serpent or we're going to arrest them and kill them. Every character in this world has no personality outside of their own religion. It's like being trapped on a planet where every single inhabitant is Matt Walsh. It's terrible. Every single person you speak to is abrasive, rude, awful, and only ever thinks about their stupid religion all the time. And it gets very tiresome and very old very quickly. Part of me wonders if this is just incompetent writing of religious people, and another part of me wonders if this is meant to be some sort of gotcha to imply that religious people are this awful in real life, when the vast majority of them are not. Even if they were, by some metric, you have not done yourself any favours by making a game full of characters this unlikable as a gotcha to a bunch of people who aren't even playing it. I actually can't tell which of those two possibilities it is. that the characters are so awful in this game, that every single one of them is at best bland, and at worst, you just want to shoot them in the face. And they get worse. Throughout the entire game, you learn more and more about this civilization and its people and the way that they think, and you just want them genocided by the end of it. The end has this stupid twist thing. I'm almost tempted to just spoil it outright, but for the one person out there who might not have played this but wants to, I won't. But the gist of it is that there's a shock villain, a sort of twist villain that they throw in there at the very end, and his plan is basically to invade the universe as we know it with ghosts. Which has never been done in a Bethesda IP before, ever. Nobody has ever had that plan who is a villain in a Bethesda game. Nope, never. I bring this up because I do want to show you the 3 responses that the player character can have to their little announced plan, assuming that they don't go along with it because it's idiotic. A friend of mine described these as the triumvirate of lackluster dialogue, and yes, that is exactly what it is. This is one of few projects I've ever seen where I think getting an AI to write the script would have actually been a lot better. There's no humour, no depth, no anything to this universe. It is a half-baked fantasy setting in space, which doesn't have any fantasy in it. It's actually funny because there was a trailer that I'd almost forgotten about, which was this really heartfelt, beautiful animation which basically depicted the scaled citadel exploding. And this is the complete antithesis of what this game stands for. Everything about this feels like the gaming equivalent of melatonin. You're just walking through a world that never stimulates you in any way. Like you're driving down a road and constantly being hypnotized by the white lines in front of you in the dark. Outside of annoyance, I just never felt a single emotion throughout this entire thing. And by the end of it, all I could say was thank God it was over. There is an ending where you can just be incredibly based and just tell everybody involved to go away. And unfortunately, whilst that is a really funny ending, it does result in you being penalised as you don't really get to keep anything from doing the DLC. It's almost like not playing the DLC at all as far as reward goes. So it's kind of, I wanted to do it, but then at the same time when I saw the consequences, it was just too much of a pain. And I might play more Starfield if more comes out later on, because I'm genuinely curious to see if they can top this as far as terrible everything goes. If you're here for a gameplay analysis, it's Starfield. There's nothing new. Nothing's been added. In fact, this is the first DLC which doesn't feel like DLC. You know in Bethesda games how new DLC areas look different and have different clothing, differently designed NPCs and differently designed dialogue and stuff like that. Like Far Harbor has a very different vibe to base game Fallout 4. The Pits has a very different vibe to base game Fallout 3. And the Shivering Isles especially has a very different vibe to base game Oblivion. Well, honestly, if people get a Game of the Year edition of this, they're probably just going to stumble upon this and not even realise it was DLC. There's nothing new really added to the game. As far as like weapons and items go, if they have new weapons and items that have been designed for this DLC, I didn't even notice them. I couldn't tell them apart from the base game. I'm not saying that there aren't any at all, but I didn't pick them up. I didn't notice them. There was absolutely nothing to differentiate this from base game Starfield. There's not, as far as I can tell, any new game mechanics, and there's also just not much else going on that you haven't encountered before. It's just the usual sleepwalking through Starfield experience that you know and love from last year's release. Yes, it is confined to one planet over the course of the story like a traditional Bethesda game, because we're on the planet of awful Kent Hovind people who have absolutely no personality outside the religion as established before. Going back to the religion thing for a second, I recently played a game called Pentiment. In that game, everybody's religious as well, and a lot of the gameplay is based around religion. Every character, minus one or two minor ones, is religious in this game. It's set in the 1500s after all. And despite not being religious myself, I found my respect for these people to grow over the course of the game. Hell, their insights into their religious perspective was actually very interesting to me, and I very much appreciated it. Yeah, I would recommend Pentiment over this in a heartbeat, by the way. It's a very, very enjoyable game. It's a stylized game, which is written by the people who made Fallout New Vegas. It has a world of very likable and relatable characters, and a very interesting and in-depth story, which will take you several hours to complete, but will stay with you for a very long time after. I bring this up partly because Pentiment's a good game and Shit on the Face isn't, but also because I feel like any commentary I believe the writers were going for with religion, because I do believe that they were attempting something, falls flat on its face, and they probably should have played that game before even attempting it. Every single thing that you can take about religion from this game has been said somewhere else, and a lot of it is, I'm not gonna lie, it's ignorant, and this comes from someone who has a very negative opinion on religion. And because the entire DLC is based around this, the story aspects of it can be written off. Especially when the main bad guy has this horrific plan, and after stopping it, people are mad that you stopped it, because they secretly wanted him to do the awful thing, because their religion dictates it. And at that point, if there was a nuke this entire place from orbit option, I would have hit my enter key so hard that I would have needed a replacement keyboard. This is a vapid and utterly joyless experience, which honestly just made me mad because of how awful it is. By the end of it, I began to remember several quotes that the industry have been trying to feed me for years about how all the games that I grew up with as a kid, like Time Splitters and Rayman, just do not have a place in the world anymore. That nobody wants them. They aren't profitable. Nobody on the planet wants these games, and therefore they just can't exist anymore. But we have room for Shit on the Face. We have room for fucking Concord. We have room for all these other games that anyone who looked at them would tell you, I wouldn't buy that, mate. And these same people who constantly tell you that everything is about gains and losses and money and everything else spent millions making them a reality. Millions making sure that they exist, despite the fact that literally nobody asked for them, nobody wanted them, and this was proven by the fact that nobody's playing them. Have they learnt a goddamn thing? Well, this article from 16 hours ago on Games Radar seems to suggest otherwise. Apparently, Bethesda's not patting themselves on the back whilst ignoring their players, but there are plenty of people who love this game. Right, okay, Emil. If someone comes up to you and tells you that they enjoyed this game, you are morally obligated to section them under the Mental Health Act. There is nothing enjoyable about Shattered Space, whatever. Emil was very proud of the expansion, and that most of the quests and levels were developed by BGS veterans going all the way back to Morrowind. Morrowind was a major inspiration for the DLC's main planet and city too. Really? You don't fucking say. The dev said, Starfield fans who haven't played the DLC are missing out. No, you're really not. I want to objectively say right now, this is misinformation, right? This is fake news. Nobody's missing out by not playing this. I missed out on hours of quality of life by playing this. And those who played it and are disappointed make him sad, pointing out that the studio has also been hearing from plenty of people who love it. So they're ignoring people like me who actually played the fucking thing, and are actually saying, Bethesda, you made a product that literally nobody can enjoy. And they're constantly trying to find the positive reviews from people who are probably insane. And I'm sorry if you do actually enjoy this. Like, legitimately, I don't want to imply that there's anything wrong with you, that you enjoy this, but what the hell is wrong with you? This is the most vapid, pathetic attempt at anything I think I've ever seen in a long time. If you enjoy this, likelihood is you're just playing games that are so bad that your perspective on it has been completely screwed. Because I know this, I actually went down that road at one point. Play some brilliant classics, and then come back to this and see that it is just not what anybody should want. You know, at the start of this year, I played Wadjet Blackwell trilogy. I finally got around to it because I played their game The Shiver, which was also absolutely fantastic. And it was also about religion, and good. And it ends with two rabbis beating the shit out of each other on a rooftop, making it the best game ever made. And the Blackwell saga is so good. Like, the writing, the story, the characters, the gameplay, the constant improvement between installments. There's a major graphical improvement in between installments. And those games stuck with me for a while after beating them. I played each one for as long as it took to beat and then moved on to the next one and beat all of them in a week. And I truly loved every second of it. I will go back to those games because they were so good. And what bothers me the most is that companies like Wadjet Eye Studios, who make games like Hobbs Barrow, which was also fantastic, are basically having to make do with what they have, whilst games like Bethesda are making this uninspired crap with hundreds of millions at their disposal. I'd legitimately really like to see if 1% of this game's budget went to a developer like Lucky Wallower / Lucky Pickaninny so that he could create that Last of Us thing that he always wanted to make. Even if that was abjectly terrible at the end, I'd still think it would be more interesting than this. Emil has been at the forefront of Bethesda's PR campaign in the wake of Shattered Skull's lukewarm reception, telling us in a recent interview that it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but what is.
Stop saying dumbass things! You're not even making sense!
Cups of tea. This is not tea, right? This is not fucking tea. This is mushed up leaves that you found in the garden put into a tea bag and you're trying to convince me that I'm drinking tea. That is what this is, Emil. He boasts that Shattered Space lets players explore like they used to in Fallout and Skyrim. Yeah, but you know what the difference was between this and Fallout and Skyrim? I actually wanted to explore in Fallout and Skyrim. Not try to find the fastest path to get to a place because the alternative was walking through nothing for hours. I played this in Chaos Reigns, the Mortal Kombat 11 expansion, and I would like to talk about Mortal Kombat 11 if I can find the energy and the time, because that game also does not deserve to be let off the hook for all the awful stuff that it's pulled over the past year. But my god, it's depressing to me that the people writing these multi-million-dollar projects would not win even the most basic of high school writing contests. Every single one of these terrible games has just come out with the most half-baked first draft, not very well thought through, and generally just not cared about stories. As a result, they've produced an exasperating mess that I personally will never go back to because I legitimately just have better things to do in my life. We do not have to put up with this at this point in time. We can play other things and we can enjoy them. I only played this because I bought the special edition last year of Starfield and got it for free. And I didn't want to waste money on my investment. And the fact that I see it as an investment and not just, oh, I bought a game and got some free DLC, kind of says a lot, doesn't it? I would not advise that anybody spend money on this, and if you own it, I don't think you should feel obligated to play it. It actually is on par with base game Fallout 76 for a complete lack of interest from me. I'd recommend Fallout 76 Wastelanders campaign over this. Are there any positives before I wrap this up? Well, I suppose there is one great bit of music right at the very end when you fight the final boss. I'll give it that. There's like one bit of music that I remember being distinctly kind of good. Not so good that I'd play this for Christ knows how many hours to get up to it, but it was alright. I would like to wrap up by saying that I have touched on the fact that there are a lot of games that just can't exist in this climate, despite the fact that games like Time Splitters have Space Marines and multiplayer components and an arcade element and crazy characters, all of which have succeeded in the last decade, but publishers will insist that there's no audience for Time Splitters. And this is honestly why the games industry is dying. Because all they're doing, and they're still doing it, is pushing people away. They're telling people that, oh, well, what we're doing is great. If it's so fucking great, why is nobody appreciating it? If it's so great, why is nobody buying it? A lot of my friends are playing Starfield right now, right? But they're not playing this. A lot of my friends are playing modded Starfield and just enjoying the game as a sandbox, but none of them want to play this DLC. What does that tell you about the absolute ineptitude of it? People who like Starfield aren't excited for this. All I can say is that I've been weaning off AAA published games for a few years now. Like, not even by choice, they just do not appeal to me. And companies like EA have specifically said they don't want me to buy their products anymore, so I stopped buying their products. And what's kind of funny is, it's actually really easy to just stop buying these games, because there's no appeal. There was a time where I legitimately used to think, oh man, that game looks so good, I really need to get it. I don't feel that way anymore. I look at stuff like this and I'm like, I can wait for it to go on sale, or I can skip that one. What happened? These guys are banking on the concept of FOMO, right? Except FOMO is becoming less and less of a thing each time, and we have things like this to thank for it. Just do yourself a solid, right? Treat yourself to any of the games I mentioned in this video, or a game that you saw a long time ago and thought, I really want to play that someday, and never did. Maybe you bought it and it's still on your shelf and you've not touched it yet. I don't know, but whatever. Pick a game that's not this and play that instead. Because even if it's bad, it'll be an experience unlike this.
Professor Curious is okay.